Hi, everybody. Dan here. On this, the first week, I want to go through some public speaking themes in a very general way. I'm going to make two assumptions about this class, as I do about all my public speaking classes. They may not apply to everybody, but I think this may ring a bell with some. My first assumption is you hate public speaking. And in fact, this may be the motivation for taking the online oral presentation class, so that you can get credit for a public speaking class without ever having to do it, without ever having to actually speak in front of the public. My second assumption is you avoid public speaking as much as possible. The problem is, it's not always possible to avoid it, and it's never desirable in terms of your career. Studies show it's quite the reverse. Managers are looking for communication skills. That's the number one thing they're looking for in potential managers. So I hope that after this course, you'll be okay if you're asked to give a presentation in the workplace, for real, in front of managers and peers and customers and associates. It can be very intimidating. So let's talk about this in a general sense. In a meeting, have you ever been afraid to be called on? Afraid to have all the eyes in the room turn around and look at you, and suddenly you're on the spot and you have to answer the question? Have you ever been afraid of being asked to give a presentation? Your manager walks into the room and says, I need somebody to give a presentation to visiting executives from our New York subsidiary. Let me see, who shall it be? As their eyes fall on everybody in the room and they pick somebody else. And you're so relieved. But then that day comes, and that person gives a presentation and knocks the ball out of the park. And you're envious. You realize you've just missed a great opportunity to distinguish yourself from all of your peers. Let me ask you this. In a group, have you ever been afraid to ask a question? In a group meeting, say. Of course, you think it's a dumb question, when in reality, more people in that room than you can imagine are hoping somebody is going to ask this question. Or have you ever nodded yes when you really didn't understand something? Your manager says, okay, everybody got it? Everybody nods their heads. Now, maybe you have every intention of going back to your desk and opening up your computer and researching the issue. But you're nodding yes, that you do understand something. Have you ever been afraid to stand in front of a group and be the center of attention? I'll tell you right now, being the center of attention frightens a lot of people. But the more you focus on the message, not on the messenger, you're the messenger. You focus on yourself, you're going to get nervous. Focus on the message, and you'll be happy to be the center of attention, because you have the honor, you have the privilege of relaying, of conveying a message you really believe in. What about this? Have you ever forgotten a name immediately after being introduced to somebody? We've all done that. For some reason, our self-consciousness becomes clouded the minute we shake hands with somebody and we completely forget their name. I'll give you techniques to deal with that. Generally speaking, a person who can communicate is rare in every organization. And that person will become the go-to person for his or her management. That person will rise in the organization, and you can be that person. I want you to imagine how your life might change if you became a dynamite speaker. Not just your professional life, but even your personal life. Now, the minute I say dynamite speaker, you may disqualify yourself. You may be saying, oh, well, I'm not a dynamite speaker. Let me tell you, you might be. If you are shy, you can still be yourself and be a great speaker. You don't have to showboat. There are quiet, reserved speakers who have tremendous credibility. Picture Bill Gates. Picture Albert Einstein. These people are not dynamic speakers, or were. Einstein obviously is no longer with us. He was not a dynamic speaker. People listened to his every word. Why? Because he had tremendous credibility. So just because you're quiet and shy doesn't mean you cannot be a great speaker. And just the opposite is true. Often dynamic speakers can come across as fast talkers, as con men, as BSers, as phonies. So you can be yourself, but we still have to work on the fundamentals of public speaking, and we have to have the energy. I can say that communicating has never been easy, but it's gotten harder. Communicating in my day, when I was a professional public speaker, was not as hard as it is today. Never has it been harder to seize and to keep the attention of your audience. I'd like you to see a typical class of mine. You think I'm kidding, huh? Well, I'm not kidding. Today, your audience is either texting or thinking about texting. Your audience is suffering from ADD, a media-induced attention deficit disorder. Your audience has a very, very limited attention span. Your audience will be discourteous to you, and sadly, you may be discourteous to your audience if you are looking at your phone, looking at your tablet, or otherwise not paying attention to the speaker. And this is the challenge of public speaking in the 21st century. Now, I often ask my classes to share with me their obstacles to oral presentation. This is what my students tell me. I have no confidence in my material. Well, generally speaking, this is up to you. You have to be familiar with your material. You have to fall in love with your material. You don't want to memorize it, but you've got to know it to the bone. What about this? I'm very timid up there when I give public speaking, when I give a presentation. This is very, very common. Being timid, of course, is a manifestation of nervousness. Nervousness is good. Nervousness is your fund of energy. But often when you hear your own voice, and your own voice is squeaky and weak and wavering, it adds to your nervousness. It makes you even more timid up there. So this is why I recommend when you give a presentation, have a big voice. A big voice will give you confidence. In the opening start here, you saw that video of the young lady doing kata in karate, right? Do you remember how she announced her kata? How she bellowed it out to the judges. A big voice makes you feel strong, even though you might be quaking in your boots. So I'll be asking all of you, even on your webcam presentations, to speak up, to project that voice. What about this? I'm nervous when the audience knows the subject better than I do. This happens to all of us. And what you do is give some love to your audience. You say to your audience, look, I know you're the experts. You've forgotten more than I'll ever know about this subject. Put yourself in my place. Management has asked me to give this presentation to you when you already know it. But I'm so glad you're here because you will keep me on the rails if I tend to go off track. So give your audience some love. Sometimes I go blank and then I listen to myself and it gets worse. What happens here is you go blank and you fill that space with ums and ahs. Now, why do you go blank? You go blank because you tried to memorize your presentation. You don't have an outline in front of you. And that outline in front of you is composed of key words that keep you on track. What about this? Reading instead of speaking my presentation. This can refer to a PowerPoint or it could refer to your notes. We're going to get over that obstacle. You don't want to read. When you do PowerPoint, you want keywords. You never want sentences. If you have sentences, you might read it. You want keywords to prevent you from reading. Believe me, if you give a presentation 10 times and it's different every single time, that's okay. It should be different. It shouldn't be canned. It shouldn't be memorized. So feel free, feel flexible, As long as you get that information across, that's all that counts. What about this? My audience is bored. Well, how do you know they're bored? Well, I can see it in their facial expressions. Believe me, you cannot read faces. We are going to spend a lot of time on that in my lectures. But remember now, you cannot read faces. Or what about this? You may think this is not an obstacle. I've had students tell me I have no problem public speaking. I love public speaking. This can be an obstacle if you think you're a great public speaker and you don't conform to the fundamentals of public speaking because you're beyond that. I've seen people who think they're great public speakers completely blow it. And I've seen speakers who were timid and shy and afraid, but who followed the fundamentals and gave tremendous presentations. Your obstacles are not unique. We all have them. Some of us have even greater obstacles. In this course, we're going to hurdle them. I can say this in a nutshell. Try to remember this. Public speaking is all about control. Control of your material, control of yourself, control of your audience. What I mean by that is control of your audience's reception of your material and control of your audience's attention span. We'll go into that in later presentations. Finally, I want to suggest all of you ought to be looking into Toastmasters. It is the greatest organization ever, dedicated to making us all better speakers. I've been a member for 30 years. I want to end with this quote from Mary Wilson of the Supremes. She once said, being on stage is like being in heaven. Now, you may not think that. Being on stage is not like being in heaven to you, for you. But it will definitely be less of a hell after these 10 weeks. So I welcome you to this class. You're going to have fun, and I'll see you in the next screencast.